Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to grab your calendars right now and circle August 12th, 2026. Why? Because millions of people across the Northern Hemisphere are going to be looking up at the sky for honestly one of nature's most spectacular events, a total solar eclipse. It's one of those rare astronomical phenomenons that literally stops people in their tracks. So today, we're going to break down exactly what to expect, where you need to be to see it, and how to experience the whole thing safely.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the 2026 eclipse itself. Then, we'll trace the path of totality, explore what the rest of Europe will see, dive into the magic of totality, and finally, go over some essential viewing safety. Let's dive in.
Starting with Part 1, the 2026 solar eclipse.
So what's actually happening up there? Well, during the solar eclipse, the moon slides directly between the sun and the Earth, casting a massive shadow right down onto our planet. Now, that shadow actually has two very distinct parts. You've got the umbra, which is the absolute darkest, narrowest central part of the shadow, and then you have the penumbra, which is the much larger, lighter outer shadow. And as we'll see, where you happen to be standing in these specific zones dictates entirely what kind of eclipse you are going to experience.
It's basically a giant game of celestial geometry. If you are standing directly in that narrow umbra, you get the grand prize, a total solar eclipse, where the moon completely blocks out the sun. But if you're in the much wider penumbra, you're going to witness a partial solar eclipse. The sun will look like a glowing crescent, but it won't be completely covered. So your exact location on Earth changes the experience completely.
Moving on to Part 2, the path of totality. Now, the path of totality for 2026 is super interesting. It sweeps across Greenland, down through Western Iceland, and straight into northern Spain, grazing just a small slice of Portugal. But, and this is a massive but, being in the path of totality simply isn't enough if clouds roll in and block your view. It's all about risk versus reward here. If you look at historical cloud cover data, Iceland has about a 24% chance of clear skies. Contrast that with mainland Spain, sitting much higher, around 65%. And places like the Balearic Island of Ibiza, they jump all the way up to 73%. So travelers really have a huge decision to make when they're chasing those clear skies.
Just to give you a concrete example of a prime location, the European Space Agency, the ESA, is actually planning to set up and observe the eclipse from Lyon, Spain. Totality in Lyon is going to happen roughly between 2027 and 2032 Central European summertime, and it'll last for about 1 minute and 40 seconds. Spain is just prime real estate for eclipse chasers right now because it's highly accessible compared to places like Greenland or Iceland, putting you right in the heart of the action.
All right, Part 3, Europe's partial eclipse view.
As you can see, that tiny little slice represents the highly exclusive, incredibly narrow path of totality. But what about that massive remaining majority? Well, that represents the millions upon millions of people across Europe who will still get to witness an absolutely spectacular partial eclipse. You really don't have to pack your bags and fly across the continent to get a piece of the action here. Let's bring this right down to a local level. If you happen to live in the Netherlands, for instance, you are totally outside the path of totality. But observers there are still going to experience a really significant partial eclipse starting around 1914 and wrapping up around 2105 CEST. The sun is still going to be dramatically covered, which is going to make for an unforgettable evening sky right from your very own backyard.
Bringing us to Part 4, the magic of totality.
For those in the path, the approach to totality is completely surreal. Minutes before it happens, the sky dramatically darkens, and you can actually physically feel the temperature drop around you. Then, just seconds before, the very last tiny sliver of sunlight vanishes. And when totality finally hits, the sky goes twilight dark. Bright stars and planets just suddenly appear in the middle of the day, and the entire horizon glows with this crazy 360-degree sunset. It is, no joke, completely awe-inspiring.
But the absolute ultimate prize of totality is seeing the solar corona. This is the sun's extremely faint outer atmosphere. Normally, you can't see it at all because it's completely hidden by the blinding radiation of the sun's surface. But during those brief, magical minutes of totality, the moon acts as a perfect shield, revealing this glowing, ethereal halo. And it's not just beautiful to look at. Scientists actually use this tiny window of time to study vital solar activity and space weather.
Finally, Part 5, essential eclipse viewing safety.
Okay, let's get serious for a second, because there are absolute don'ts you must follow. Never,
ever look directly at the partial eclipse with your naked eyes. Even if 99% of the sun is covered, that remaining 1% can cause instant, severe eye damage. Never rely on ordinary sunglasses. They are entirely useless against intense solar radiation. And crucially, do not look through an unfiltered telescope, binoculars, or a camera viewfinder. Magnifying equipment basically acts like a magnifying glass on an ant. It concentrates that sunlight and will cause permanent blindness instantly. Just don't do it.
So how do you watch the partial phases safely? You absolutely must use specially designed solar viewing glasses or handheld viewers, and they must strictly comply with the ISO 12312-2 International Safety Standard. Before you put them on your face, inspect the lenses carefully. If they're scratched, if they're torn, or damaged in literally any way, throw them out immediately. It is not worth the risk.
Now, there is exactly one magical exception to this rule. During the brief period of totality, it is actually safe to look directly at the eclipse without eye protection. But listen very carefully. This is only when the moon is 100% covering the sun. The absolute exact second you see the first bright ray of sunlight start to reappear, those ISO-certified glasses have got to go right back on your face.
So we've covered the mechanics, we've traced the paths, explored the awesome magic of the corona, and locked down the safety rules. Which really just leaves us with one final question for you. Where will you be standing when the moon's shadow falls across the Earth on August 12, 2026? Whether you're chasing the umbra in Spain or enjoying the partial eclipse from your backyard in the Netherlands, it's time to start making those plans today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay safe and enjoy the show.